Unless you've been living under a rock for the past decade, you know that cordless circular saws now outperform their corded counterparts. Where battery-powered circular saws once struggled for adequate performance, top models now complete full-depth cuts through dense material. Our crew manually tested 11 different models and even several battery pack configurations to determine the reigning Sidewinder champ. So exactly which one of these circular saws is the best? I'll get to that. But first, let me talk about what my crew and I look for in a circular saw. I'll start with the obvious. Cutting power is a crucial factor when buying a circular saw. Power determines whether the tool can handle cutting through things like laminated LVL boards or whether it can cut quickly and efficiently. Not only will a saw with ample cutting power get you through those tougher materials, but it will also do so while making the most of your battery life. If cutting power is your #1 priority, expect to pay for a more expensive saw. However, if you don't mind taking your time, or you do more DIY style work, well then some excellent high-value cordless options can help you get the job done for less. The second deciding factor is cutting accuracy. What good is a powerful saw if your cuts aren't accurate? Tracking is something you can't really get a feel for before putting your hands on the tool, but it can make or break the cutting experience. You don't want to drift when cutting in window openings, trimming rafters, or making stringers for stairs. Sometimes the handle design can encourage you to push to one side or the other, especially with saws featuring front and rear handles that are in line or just too close together. This can make getting a straight cut a difficult mission, especially on projects when precision is crucial. Sightlines also vary from saw to saw and significantly impact your cutting accuracy. What you should look for, pun intended, is a clear path from your eye to where the blade is making contact with the material. You also want to see any notches or marks for lining up your cut. If the tool body or any of its parts block your view of the blade, it's going to hinder your ability to line up properly and stay on that line once you're cutting. Most models have an onboard LED light, and that's definitely a welcome feature. The bottom line is you don't drive with your windshield covered, and you certainly can't cut a straight line if you can't see where you're going. Of course, price is near the top of things to consider when buying a circular saw, but that doesn't mean go out and buy the cheapest thing you can find. I'm big on value and making the most of the money that you're willing to spend. If a more expensive saw is going to last longer, perform better, and or it has the ideal features that you're looking for, well, that may be the better value than going with a bargain brand and just hoping for the best. Well, that's the nitty-gritty on the specs and the features that our crew looks for in a circular saw. And now I'm going to get into how we tested it. And I'm going to do that by looking at each competitor. We tested 11 different saws from the leading power tool manufacturers. From Craftsman, we tested their 20-volt RP brushless saw, the CMCS551, with a 6 amp hour battery. For DeWalt, we used the flagship DCS578. Now this is a FlexVolt 60-volt saw, and we used the 9 amp hour FlexVolt battery for testing. Flex joins the competition with their FX2141-1D. They bring their stacked lithium battery to the table, and we tested both the 6 amp hour and 10 amp hour packs. From Hilti, we've got their newest 7¼ inch saw, the SC30WR-22. We planned on running all of our tests with the 12 amp hour Neuron battery, but we were actually forced to use their 8 amp hour battery, and I'll tell you more about that later. Kobalt, Lowe's house brand, offers up the KXCS124B-03, the 7¼ inch saw on Kobalt's XTR line. We tested this saw with an 8 amp hour ultimate output battery. Makita pitched in their 40-volt GSH01 XGT saw. We've got results using both the 4 amp hour and 5 amp hour XGT batteries. Metabo HPT's CS307DAQ4 circular saw is at the same voltage, they just label it with the nominal 36 volts. This model was tested with their 4 amp hour multi-volt battery. Milwaukee might be due for an upgrade to their circular saw. And of course, just a few weeks after shooting this video, they showed off a new one at Milwaukee Pipeline. Unfortunately, it wasn't ready in time for our testing, nor will it be for several months, so we'll have to revisit this test later when that tool actually releases to the market. But for now, their 2732 is still their flagship Sidewinder, and we used it in this roundup. The standard kit comes with a 12 amp hour high output battery, but we also ran the saw with Milwaukee's newer 6 amp hour Forge battery, which claims better performance. Ridgid's best 7¼ inch offering comes in the form of its R8657, which we tested with their 8 amp hour max output battery. On the other side of the aisle, literally, it's on the other side of the aisle in our Home Depot, Ryobi represents the DIY class with their PBLCS300. Results for this saw came from using Ryobi's 4 amp hour high-performance battery. Rounding out the competition is Skil, and their CR5440B was tested using their 4 amp hour PowerCore 20 battery. For testing to be as fair and objective as possible, we supplied each saw with fresh blades from CMT Orange Tools. CMT supplied us with enough of their zero-gravity extreme framing saw blades to run tests, well, pretty much till the end of time. All joking aside, the unique tooth geometry and the plate design make for a formidable blade that was able to stand up to our aggressive testing schedule and provide consistent test results. With all of our head-to-head comparisons, we first cover the basics, and that includes measuring the bare tool weight as well as the battery weight and documenting everything in a spreadsheet. It didn't take long until we noticed that the saws varied significantly in weight. On one end of the spectrum, we had a saw from Ryobi, which was by far the lightest, and then we had Flex, the heaviest in our lineup, with its 10 amp hour stacked lithium battery. The difference? More than 4 pounds. So, what happens when you pull a lighter saw across 2 sheets of 3/4 inch OSB subfloor as opposed to a heavier saw? The idea is to apply the same amount of horizontal force and simulate a real-world amount of effort to move the saw along its path. Then, the power of the saw working against the weight of the saw does the rest. It's what you do naturally every time you cut a piece of plywood or OSB. The results can be surprising, as a more powerful saw, hampered by weight, may be outdone by a less powerful saw that weighs far less. And that's why we call this our power to weight ratio test. Using a Kreg AccuCut aluminum circular saw track plus an extender, we set up a series of pulleys mounted to our shop's concrete floor and the ceiling. Using this system, we affixed a 10-pound weight to steel cabling and pulled each saw across a double stack of 3/4 inch OSB. We prefer OSB because of its randomness, which helps give us more consistent results. Each blade was set to a 2-inch depth of cut to allow the blade to fully penetrate the OSB and give us a clean run. We noted the times each saw took, from starting its cut to striking the end plate at the end of the run. After each run, we blew off the track using a cordless blower and reset the tool. Each saw got 2 runs to determine a time, with a 3rd run available if the first 2 differed greatly. Looking at the results of this test, you probably won't be surprised to see Milwaukee in first place with their XC 6.0 forged battery. You may, however, be surprised to see Craftsman in 3rd place. What's interesting about this test is just how much it takes into account tool weight as well as power. And as I mentioned earlier, a more powerful saw isn't necessarily going to go faster in this test, particularly if it weighs more. In the end, you can think of this as a test that more or less shows you which saw is going to more easily make a low-demand, straightforward cut. You can almost see the lower-ranked tools as a who's who of heavier saws. This makes the Milwaukee Forge-equipped saw even more impressive, as it demonstrates that supplying more power without having to resort to an oversized pack can take even a medium-heavy saw to the top position. The design of our next performance test, the full-depth blade cut test, gauges each circular saw's power when driven by a tough load. The first thing we did was double the weight from 10 pounds to 20 pounds, and then we stacked 4 layers of 3/4 inch OSB subfloor and ran each saw across, this time with its blade fully extended for a maximum depth cut. Now, astute subscribers are going to note that there are some complications with this test, and indeed, we saw the same problems. For one, each of our saws differed in how deep their blades would go. Still, the idea wasn't to allow saws with more power to get by with less blade depth, but simply to test each saw to its maximum capacity. After all, that's what happens when you slam home the shoe. You get a max depth cut. I wanted to see what happens when you bury the blade. In the end, we got some pretty interesting results. Around half our saws couldn't complete the cut. Of those that did, well, we recorded times to differentiate them during scoring. This time around, DeWalt killed it with their FlexVault saw, running through the entire length of the test in just 7.7 seconds. That was quick. But both Flex and Milwaukee weren't all that far behind. Even the last saw to make the full cut, the Hilti SC 30WR-22, did it in 13.67 seconds. The last thing to note here is that both Flex and Makita completed these tests with their stock batteries, in addition to the highest packs we could put on them. From there, it was just a matter of measuring how far each remaining saw got before it went into protection. As it turns out, most didn't get very far. You can see that Milwaukee, with an HD12 battery, got the furthest of the saws to stall out, 69.25 inches. After that, the prosumer and DIY brands showed the difference between them and pro-targeted saws. Now, to be fair, having reviewed brushless power tools for over 14 years, this is kind of a good thing. Prosumers and DIYers need that extra protection so they don't burn out tools that aren't designed for all-day long use 5 to 6 days a week. When running our subjective crosscut, bevel, and compound miter cuts on 2x10 lumber, we're looking for several things. First, does the blade guard hang up when making any or all of these cuts? Second, can we see the sightline clearly in each type of cut? Third, are the adjustment knobs or components easy to use? Are they accurate and are they effective? We gave each saw subjective ratings on a 1 to 5 scale for the sightline, blade guard, and adjustability. I have to say, Craftsman and Makita both impressed us with how well you could see where you were cutting, regardless of whether you were making a cross cut, a bevel cut, or a compound miter. How well a blade guard handles various cuts can affect whether your cross cuts, bevel cuts, and compound cuts go smoothly or whether they cause you to go off track when the guard hangs up and refuses to slide over the workpiece. If you're like me, you almost instinctively lift the guard up when starting certain cuts. Some of the better saws, like Craftsman, Milwaukee, and Flex, all but eliminate the need with guards that don't tend to hang, even when making a 45-degree cut while beveling the blade. Saws like Kobalt, Hilti, DeWalt, and Makita caught up or hung up on 1 or 2 of our tests. The last thing we checked in this section was the ability or inability to set the cut depth without putting down the saw. The first thing was whether the saw had accurate depth markings. Another issue, however, had to do with whether your hand blocked the depth guide, forcing you to set it down to make an accurate adjustment. Now, for anyone who uses a circ saw regularly, this really isn't a big deal. Most of us set the depth without ever looking. So this didn't have a huge emphasis in our rankings, but we felt it was worth noting. Now let's talk winners. We picked the best saws across a series of categories, but let's start with the most powerful, the DeWalt DCS578. Since the last time we did this roundup, manufacturers have had more than 4 years to update their tools, which makes it all the more amazing that DeWalt is still the most powerful cordless sidewinder we've ever tested. It absolutely smashed our full depth cut test and had the fastest time across the board, just 7.7 seconds. It also averaged well in our rip cut test, slicing through a dual layer of OSB in just 22.19 seconds. While a handful of other saws did it faster, the DeWalt's weight, that flex ball battery, is a beast, and the higher friction shoe really held it back. I know power isn't everything, which is why DeWalt adds some icing on the cake with a very comfortable handle and easy to adjust controls for both bevel and depth. This is a great tool for you if you switch back and forth when framing up trusses or similar. If you're looking for a great saw without emptying your pocketbook, we named the Skil 20-volt brushless circular saw our best circular saw for the money. Keeping the price down without having disappointing performance or build quality is at the heart of finding the best value in a cordless circular saw. Both Ryobi and Skil excel in this category. However, I find the Skil PowerCore 20 XP 7¼ circ saw consistently delivers slightly better value and performance overall. From scoring remarkably well in our power to weight ratio speed cutting test to ticking all the boxes on adjustability and ergonomics, Skil makes a saw that, if you aren't in a hurry, checks all the boxes for getting the job done. While a very usable tool, I hesitate to put it at the same level as professional saws. Keep it in its performance wheelhouse, and the Skil has just enough features to love if a prosumer level tool can suffice. Solidifying its win for value, the kit is priced at less than $170. For homeowners and DIYers, I recommend the Craftsman V20 RP brushless circular saw. Craftsman's circular saw surprised me just a little with its real-world performance. Coming in third in our speed test, it ripped through 2 full sheets of stacked 3/4-inch OSB in just 20.22 seconds. In this power to weight ratio test, it beat the likes of DeWalt, Hilti, even Flex. The test revealed that the saw combines enough power to get the job done with a lightweight design. In fact, the Craftsman CMCS551 was the lightest saw of our group of 14 tool and battery combinations. The tool's price of $129 makes it an easy choice for homeowners and serious DIYers looking for a capable and dependable tool with a solid warranty. And finally, the best cordless circular saw of the bunch, the Milwaukee M18 Fuel 2732. Milwaukee remains our overall best cordless circular saw for good reason. While other saws might beat it out in one of our tests or some of the other metrics, This brushless saw outperforms everyone as the sum of its parts. With a forged battery installed, it topped our rip cut test and aced our full depth cutting test, where we buried the blade in 4 sheets of 3/4 inch OSB and attached 20 pounds of weight to pull it through. In the end, when tallying it up, when using the XC 6.0 forged battery, Milwaukee consistently edged out the competition, whether geared towards power, speed, or overall performance. Beyond that, the Milwaukee 2732 has all the features I look for in a circular saw. Excellent adjustability, good sightlines, and a reasonable price. While the kit comes with a 12 amp hour high output battery, I definitely recommend picking up the forged XC 6.0 battery for the absolute best performance. Well, there you have it, the very best circular saw. Now, if you have any questions about any of the saws we've tested or got some feedback on your own, please leave those in the comments below. And what tools do you want to see in the next head-to-head round of testing? Leave that in the comments as well. And don't forget to mash that like button and hit subscribe so you don't miss out on our next video. And as always, thanks for watching.